Nobody likes conflict at work. You're busy enough just trying to do your job. So when a colleague puts up a huge fight when you're trying to get them to do their job, or there's a bad policy being introduced, you don't push back, you avoid the fight, and you just don't want to be difficult. But here's the problem. Every conflict you avoid makes things slightly worse, until you won't have a choice anymore, and you'll be stuck dealing with a mess that could have been prevented if you dealt with the problems one at a time when they came up. By then it'll be a lot harder to fix. So today we're talking about the hidden costs of avoiding conflict at work and what you can do instead. Every time you choose to take the easy way out and avoid conflict, you're making a trade. You're choosing a peaceful day today for a slightly worse tomorrow, and it's going to cost you in the long run. Their colleague who got away with dodging their responsibility by being difficult, you've taught them that that's something that works, so they'll do it again. The policy you knew was bad and you didn't fight, it's now your everyday. It'll become a permanent part of your work. And when you finally try to push back, you'll seem unreasonable because why are you bringing this up now? You should have said something at the time, right? We've all had to deal with people at work or in life that are being difficult every time you need them to do something. Instead of just doing it, they stall, they whine, they get angry, they blame people, they look for other excuses. They will do anything in their power so that getting them to do what you need them to do is too much of a chore for you. And because you're busy and don't have the time or energy to deal with a battle every time, you might just decide to not bother and to do the work yourself or turn to somebody else. And that's exactly what they want. So congratulations, you've taught them a very important lesson. It's that being difficult works. Once they get away with it once, they will continue to do it. Next time, the excuses are a little stronger, the resistance is a little harder. It's not my responsibility, this is not my job. Can't somebody else do it? Oh, I'm already so busy. I don't really know how to do that. Whatever you want. What they want is for you to decide that it's not worth the trouble. They will get better at it. They will have more elaborate excuses. And worst of all, they're gonna have precedents. Later, when you really need them to do something, and you don't have a choice, and what do they say? Why are you being like this? It's not what you said before. We've never done it like this. I've never had to do this. This has never been a problem before. We've had an understanding. We've always worked so well together. You're gonna seem unreasonable. After all, they always got out of the responsibility. It hasn't actually been their responsibility to do these things. And suddenly, you look like a problem. They've spent all this time training you to accept their excuses. But at this point, they've built up a chain of precedents that they can point back to. And that's gonna make it harder for you to tell them that this is actually something they should be doing. After all, you've let it slide before, probably many times. So the hard truth is this: you can't ignore this stuff. I get it, you're busy. You don't want to spend your time fighting battles that have nothing to do with your job. Breaking through somebody's layers of excuses. And it can be incredibly uncomfortable to have to do this. After all, it's in their interest to make it uncomfortable, so you don't want to do it. But if you don't deal with it in the moment, it just gets harder and harder to do so later. That's why you can't afford to ignore it. So how do you deal with this? You take the time, you make it a priority to deal with it. I know you're busy, you'd rather just get on with your job. But like I said, it's only gonna get harder if you don't deal with it in the moment. So you slow down, you don't let them weasel out of it. You clear away every roadblock, you field every excuse, every single time, until they stop trying. I call this the parking brake method. When they get started on their bullshit, no matter how busy you are, you gotta pull that parking brake. Settle in. Just accept that you're not going to go anywhere until this is dealt with. Because you know taking the easy way out in a moment is just gonna lead to more trouble later on. There's people everywhere who've discovered that being difficult works for them. And that's because people let it work for them. So the strategy to deal with it is to make sure that it doesn't. Make it more of a pain to try and get out of it. Pull that parking brake, settle in, let go of the plans you had, because this is what you have to deal with now. You gotta lance this boil thoroughly, because otherwise it's just going to fester and cause even more trouble later. So stay calm, stay focused. Don't react emotionally, keep the conversation direct and professional. The way to deal with this is to decide you have nowhere else to be, that you will have endless patience until this is done. So take a deep breath, put it in park, and start asking questions. Hey, what's going on? Why don't you think you can do this? You can call out the pattern. I've noticed you say you're unsure about your tasks a lot. You need me to help you? clear up what your tasks are. Are you alright? What help do you need? What are you missing for you to be able to do your job? And that we don't run into this situation again. Cut down the excuses. Just take your time. When they say, oh, I didn't know this was my job, or I don't think this is my job. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. But now you do know. So let's get it done. You need to be consistent. Don't let things slide even once. Every interaction is a precedent. If you let things slide once, they know it's an option. And if there's no consequences, they will try to weasel out. I know it can feel exhausting to have to do this every time. After all, everyone should be an adult and be able to do their job. It's just not the world we live in. You can't rely on everybody to do what's right, even if you are the kind of person that does yourself. Mostly, people exploit openings. They do what is best for them, not what's best for you or for the collective. So if you want them to do what's right, you have to keep them accountable, and you can't let them get away with not doing it. And it would be nice if you could just let things slide once, and they wouldn't have any consequences. But I promise you, if you do, it's going to get worse, and it's going to haunt you in the long run. Much better to establish that this is not an option. This isn't about being harsh. I don't mean you should ask them to do things that aren't a part of their job. Not at all. This is about people who are trying to avoid doing the things that are their job. The people who take responsibility and do their jobs properly shouldn't have to carry extra weight because someone else figured out how to avoid work. It's about how to keep weasels accountable, and that's with a short leash. We've all been there. A new policy or initiative rolls out at work, and you can tell it's bad. Whether you know it's going to lead to unnecessary busy work, maybe it goes counter to what you know to be true or your business. Either way, you know it's a problem, but you don't want to be difficult, so you let it slide. You say nothing, you nod along, big mistake. It's gonna come back to haunt you. Once a bad policy is in place, it's really hard to get rid of it. They don't just stay bad, they tend to get worse. By the time you realize the full impact of the small things you just didn't fight, it's often too late to fix. And these small things that you don't fight, even though you know they're bad, they can snowball. And I've seen situations where these small bad policies that weren't fought in the moment snowballed. And I've seen it develop into layoffs and even closures, and ended up bankrupting whole companies. At first, it may only seem like a small inconvenience. Little extra paperwork, maybe a process isn't as good as you know it could be, but bad policies don't just affect individuals. They impact the entire workflow, and they compound. They slow teams down, create unnecessary frustration, and lower productivity. And here's the real danger. Once a policy is in place because no one's pushed back on it, it becomes the new normal. It gets baked into the system. And when it gets so bad at a later point that you have to challenge it, what do you hear back? No one's had an issue with this before. This is our process. This is part of how we do things. It's too late to change it now. Why didn't you say something earlier? Now when you say something, instead of looking at the policy and questioning whether it's really the right thing to do, the leadership might question you for being unhappy with how things are going. What often gets overlooked is that bad policies don't just make work a bit more difficult, they lower morale. They make good employees stop caring or leave. People who stay, they either adapt to the incentives of the bad policies or end up doing the bare minimum. The result is a toxic cycle where bad decisions go unchallenged, good employees disengage or leave, the bad ones exploit whatever systems they can to their advantage, and the overall work environment just gets worse and worse. Maybe all because you didn't want to be difficult. The truth is, somebody has to be difficult. I get it, pushing back isn't easy, but the sooner you raise concerns, the easier they are to address. You have to speak up early. Old policy is calcified and entrenched and very hard to get rid of. When something is first introduced and is not part of the day-to-day yet, there's a lot of room for adjustment. But once it's in place for months or years, it becomes much harder to change. So next time a bad policy rolls out, don't just sigh and accept it and roll your eyes. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, offer better alternatives, voice your concerns. Because trust me, staying silent today only makes things harder tomorrow. And eventually, you will either have to quit or get fired. Because things don't get better by themselves. I know you might be afraid of being labeled as difficult, but either you work in a company that appreciates somebody who cares enough to speak out, or you might want to change companies anyway. The goal should be that new policies improve work, make things easier, streamline processes, not make them worse. So if you see something coming down the line that you know to be bad, speak up. If you're working in a company that wants to succeed, they will value you speaking up. So, what do you think? Have you ever had to deal with somebody who was fighting you tooth and nail when you asked them to do their job? Or have you been a part of a meeting where they were introducing something that was obviously a bad idea? And what did you do? Write it down in the comments. I'd be very interested to know. If you want some one-on-one coaching, help with your CV or interview preparation, there's a link where you can book a session with me down in the description. If you like the video, hit the button, subscribe, and let me know if there's something else you want me to talk about. See you next time. Thanks for watching.